Hi, so in this video, we're going to talk about how to convert between JSON and Python's built-in types. In other words, how do we do serializing and deserializing? So remember the definition of serialization in general, according to Wikipedia, is that it's translating data structure or object state into a format. So in our case, then we want to translate the Python objects into the format we want is the string that is JSON formatted. So let's start with the simplest Python objects that we can serialize, such as just an integer, or a number, floating point number, a string, or a Boolean. So the first thing that we have to do is that we definitely don't want to do the serialization manually by ourselves. But fortunately, Python has a built-in JSON library, so all you have to do is to do import JSON. And then, okay, well, let's have a number, a string, and a Boolean. Okay, so those are the three things we want to serialize. And then what we can do is to use the JSON dot dump s method from the JSON library. And what this method is doing is that it dumps um, whatever argument that we pass to it into a JSON string. So yeah, the argument that it takes is an object, right? Anything, any Python object. And what it returns then is a string that is JSON formatted and that represents the object that is passed to it as an argument. Okay, and so let's run this as an output. Well, I guess I've already run it. So if I run this, JSON dot dumps n, which is a 3.14, a number, it dumps it into a string. Now, this is a string, okay? It's not the number itself. In order to prove that to you, I will print out the type of this thing. So print this, but the type of what dump s returns, and that it is a string. So this looks like a string, and it is a string. Okay, and this is a JSON string. So remember, JSON string can be just a value by itself. So what about a string object? Well, so a string object, when it gets dumped into a JSON string that represents a string, then so that's a remember in JSON the string must be quoted in double quotes, and that's why you see the double quotes here. Okay, and then for Boolean types, whenever a Python true object gets translated into JSON true is just true, but it's a lowercase t rather than an uppercase t. Okay, what about something a little more complicated, such as a JSON object? So if you look, we probably mentioned this earlier, when you look at a JSON object, it actually looks very much like a built-in type in Python. What is that? Well, a Python dictionary, right? Key and value pairs. That's exactly what a JSON object is, and that's exactly what a Python or an entry in a Python dictionary is. Okay, what about another type? That is the array, JSON arrays. What kind of a built-in type in Python does it look like? Well, it looks like a list, right? So what that means is, given a Python list, we can the JSON library will serialize it into a JSON array, and given a Python dictionary, it will serialize into a JSON object. All right, so let's see how that's done. So here I have a Python dictionary. I actually type it out here now. So it's just P1, it's just first name, last name, and age. And I pass this Python dictionary as an argument to JSON.dump s, and I capture the result, which should give me a JSON string that represents this dictionary in Python, and I'm going to print it out. So if I run this, and there we go. So remember, JSON object starts and ends with curly braces, a pair of curly braces, and each of the attribute value pairs in a JSON object kind of correspond to a key value pairs in the dictionary, right? So first name John, last name Smith, age 27. Now, one thing I point out, remember that in Python, the string literals, it can be in either single quote or double quote. It doesn't make a difference. However, for JSON, all the string literals as well as the name of the attributes, they are always surrounded by double quotes. So if like here, I change the value of a string in Python from double quote to single quote, it doesn't make a difference to Python. But when you run it, the library, when it serializes this thing into JSON, it always surrounds that value, the string literal, with double quotes, not single quotes. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is, okay, how do we serialize Python list? As we saw earlier, Python list just looks like a JSON array. So given a list, if we just pass it to dump s, and if we run this, this is exactly the JSON formatted string that this list gets serialized into. Okay, and again, if you are not convinced that this looks like it didn't do anything, print out the return type of this thing and that this is a string. It's not just a Python list. All right, so moving on. I know we haven't actually touched on this earlier, but instead of a Python list, what do you think a Python tuple is going to be turned into if we want to serialize it into JSON? So a Python tuple really is just an immutable list, right? So as you would kind of expect, if we just serialize a Python tuple, it would just become a JSON array, just like a Python list. All right, and that's all fine. It's just when we get to the deserialization, going the other way, it would have some interesting implications. All right, so these are all the kind of the basic types. Now let's do something slightly even more interesting, and that is to have something like a list of dictionaries. So in this particular example, I have a person one, a dictionary, the person one, John Smith, and then a second person, another dictionary, Jane Doe, and I put these two dictionaries inside a list. So this is a list of dictionaries, and let's see what the JSON serializes into. Well, it becomes a JSON array. So remember array, it starts and ends with square brackets. JSON array of two JSON objects. And these two JSON objects, they are Python, the Python dictionaries, respectively, right? Now, as these JSON strings get longer, they become harder to read. So instead of dumping everything into a single long string, which JSON.dumpS would happily do, we can specify some optional arguments such as indentation. If I specify indentation of 2, then it would do a little bit of formatting. So each indentation is 2 spaces, and it would make our life a lot easier when we try to read it. Now, another alternative when you run into a long JSON string that's just impossible to read on screen is that you can copy the string and use one of these many online JSON viewers or validators. I'm going to try this one. And so in this one, you can just copy and paste a JSON string here. Now, you copy and paste it. Still, it's kind of hard to read. But then if you look at, the viewer here, then it actually shows you at the top level, there is a JSON array. And then inside the JSON array, there are two JSON objects, right? And you can expand it. And then it actually show you each of the attribute value pairs inside each of these JSON objects. So, so this would make your life a lot easier when you try to read a more complex JSON string. Now, the PyCharm JSON editor does also have kind of a similar capability. So you see these little marks here on the side, you can collapse them. So for results like this, NY times movie picks kind of a JSON, you can collapse each of these movie objects, or you can expand them. So there are many tools at your disposals when you try to comprehend kind of these big long JSON strings. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the deserialization process. So remember, serialization is we turn a Python object into a JSON formatting string. So deserialization is the opposite, is taking in a JSON string, and we are going to reconstruct the original Python object from the JSON string. Okay, so now while we can kind of do the same thing as we did, write a little bit of a few lines of code and run it in Python, we will do something a little different. We'll do it in the console rather than just running a file, and that is just because console runs kind of in an entire different process from the execution of a file, so that we are actually demonstrating that we're reconstructing the original object in a different place. All right, so Python console, if you never used the Python console before, in PyCharm, it's just this little handy button here. And now you can basically type any kind of Python code in here. So because we need the JSON library, so we have to import JSON first. And then what we are going to do is to just copy and paste the line, this line here from the slide, that instead of calling JSON.dump_s for serialization, we call JSON.load_s. And the argument that load_s takes is just a JSON formatted string. So that's that. Sorry, it scrolls around. So that's a JSON string that we obtained from serialization earlier. And just one thing to watch for is remember all the everything inside a JSON string, the quotes must be double quotes, right? So in order to put the quotes in a string literal, or double quotes in a string literal, I am surrounding my string here with a single quote, right? Okay, so all the and that's it. And and the result returned by this load_s, I'm going to assign it to the PS reconstructed. I guess that's okay. Yeah, so let me just run this and kind of watch what shows up in the variable pane here. Okay, so look at that. So it reconstructed the object, the original object from the string. And if you look at what it actually reconstructed, it reconstructed a list, like a list of 2. And you can see that it's a list of 2 dictionaries. This is dict1, this is dict2. And inside the dictionary, it has the first name John, last name Smith, age 27, etc., etc. So these are, again, Python list of Python dicts, right? That was built and returned by JSON.loads from just a JSON string. And this reconstructed JSON object contains exactly the same information as the original JSON object that from the earlier when we were doing serialization. All right, so that concludes demonstration of serializing and deserializing between Python objects and JSON strings.